the show. We want to be able to interact with you. So if you are joining us from Facebook, you're going to want to click the video and actually be able to connect with us. And if you're on YouTube, then you just type your thoughts and your wishes, and we will see them. Now, we have two very interesting Reddit posts to work with today. One is where an individual feels like their friend is referred to as a soul friendship, and I've never that's a new term for me. But in this space, they feel that though they are connected with their friend, there is something that's off. And then the other, I'm hearing a little bit more buzz about on the internet, where there is a question as to whether or not the law of attraction is actually a scam. So, deep dives today, lots of thoughts. But before we get into those deep dives and thoughts, we also have some introductions to make because maybe this is your first time on the broadcast. So, if it is, over here on this side of the screen, my name is Dahlia Rose. I am the founder of the Conduit School, where I serve my community as a healer, a teacher, and a conduit for high vibrational energies. I love guiding my students. I love working with clients on various topics that really marry well with energy work, meditation, crystals, intention based work, and any kind of services or spiritual counseling. And my background is in like I love learning. So there's so many different healing modalities under my belt, but ultimately I use these to support shifts and changes in the lives of my clients and hope to continue to do so probably until I'm dead. But I'm not on the show alone.
You do start to get to the place where you say, I hope I do this till I'm dead. And when you're in your 60s, you start saying things like, God, I hope I don't have to do this until I'm dead. So, perspective shift. Anyway, I don't have to do it. I choose to do it. I'm also a healer. I work on spiritual cleansings for people, helping them get their chakras aligned in a healthy way and overcome trauma on energetic and other levels. I also do readings for people. I do spell work for people, working as a professional witch, doing those things. And I'm half owner of Crossroads Occult at crossroadsoccult.com. And we provide handmade spiritual items for people to use in their own magical work. And my husband and I also co-created the Spiritual Path, which we've been working for almost 30 years now. And I've written a ton of books. If you go to KatrinaRaspel.com, you can see everything that I do out there on the internet. And today's topics, as always, are fascinating. I mean, we have really started taking apart Reddit. I think it's a real disservice that the people who make these posts don't get to hear our commentary. Sometimes it's a blessing, but usually I think it could be helpful to them to know what we think. And clearly, because they're putting all their dirty business out there on the internet, they're wanting people to share their opinions, and not everybody is going to be as kind as we are about it, even though we do stray into the mockery from time to time. And the things that you picked today, as usual, fascinating subjects. Some of them do kind of resonate back to other things we've talked about, but they're things that rely on resurfacing in order to stay relevant and to continue the knowledge base as it grows. You and I, as we talk about different things, have a space of time between those discussions where we have learned more and done more, experienced more. When I look back on the things that I wrote 10 years ago, 5 years ago, 2 years ago, a lot of those things are no longer relevant. And I love being able to self-correct as I learn more things. And I know that you do as well. And we share ideas together that help us both to grow. And that's one of the things I love most about the show. I love our viewers and our participants who apparently are not here at the moment, but but we love having them there. But we would do this with or without you, and that may be proven out today based on what I'm seeing. So, which one do you want to do first? Because I'm just ready to dive in on both of these guys.
I think we should do the bad energy
Let's do
one
that.
first, because
Okay.
the other one's a little more. Um, it's got a little bit more official energy to it,
It
because
does.
it is something that was created by someone.
And it's a big conversation. So
It
let's
is.
knock this one out of the ballpark. So how about if I read this one and you read the next one? Would that work for
Okay.
you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Dahlia, be in your moment.
Okay.
Open. Receive the wisdom for what you're about to hear. Get that divine power flowing through you and tell us what divinity wants this person to hear for their profoundly life impacting situation that they have put out on the internet for dissection. So here we go. It's from someone with the internet handle for Reddit of International Road 248. And it's bad energy from one particular friend is the name of the post. So I have this one friend. We've been friends for a long time, and there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 O's in a long time. We are very close. I tell them everything about my life. Big mistake. We understand each other very well. We look like soul friends because we say the same stuff all the time. Love you. That's not an identification of a soul connection. That's an identifier of a cohort. We laugh about things that others don't understand. We just speak a language that no one else understands. There's some arrogance there. I think that nobody else would understand your connection and your discussions. But, capital letters, all these years, I've always felt this bad energy from them. I don't think they're a bad person, but there is just something about them that's weird. IDK how to explain something. Explain it. Something capitalized bad. Something weird. Sometimes I feel very uncomfortable in a bad way in their presence. Sometimes I get the urge to cut them off, but when I think of cutting them off, I get scared because I feel like something bad is going to happen to me if I do. Does anyone have any idea why I feel this way? They really are not a bad person, but there's just something about them. Their aura, soul, what is it? Or is it me? Am I bad? They've used the word bad a lot of times in here. For one thing, I think they're 14. And what they consider to be a long time is probably 13, 14, 15 months. Thank you, Audria. I love you.
Girl, run.
Right? So what's hooking me up about this? Okay. They have a frequent insistence that this is a good person. I know they're a good person. I know they're really not a bad person. But at the end of it, they question, am I bad? So why are you so confident that they're a good person, but you can't walk in confidence that you're a good person? There's something there. There's something there we need to look at. And the comment, so I have this one friend. That makes me wonder, have you got any other friends? And is maybe that's why you're clinging so hard to this person? And so here's what I'm going to say to start us out, and then divine wisdom will speak with Dahlia over here. If you have, and you know what, I just can't even say any better than Audrey did. If you're having such a bad feeling about a person in your life that you need to go on the internet and ask for permission to run the fuck away from them, you don't need an answer. You got your answer.
Yeah.
Now, if you feel something bad coming off of another person, law of attraction would blame you for that. That you have attracted in an abuser or you've attracted in someone that needs to convey a lesson to you through difficult circumstances. But what I would say is you're picking up on something. Now, it might be a reflection of something in you, but it's probably more likely. And you talked about patterns before. And that's what I see more and more. And as I get older, I can feel that these patterns, there's some validity to them. And every now and then you get the thing that makes you say, but not all that often once you start to see the recurring patterns over and over. People as a whole are fairly predictable. And so, what I would say is you're picking up on something. It might be something you don't want to look at, but it could be something like they're envious of you, and that creates a negative influence as they're talking to you and sharing with you and responding to your energy. It could be something as simple as you're both good people and this is not a good connection. And that happens, just because you're both good people doesn't mean that you are ever meant to spend even 15, 20 minutes together. It doesn't mean that you're compatible just because you're both good people. And so, why are you working so hard to maintain this relationship, and why? I understand that when I'm reading this, they're setting up an atmosphere of what this relationship is like and all the reasons why this is a positive association, and that's great. But it almost comes off as though they're trying to these are the reasons they're giving themselves for
Right.
why they shouldn't end this relationship. And my thought, I tell you, this comes from years of overriding my instinct about a person and regretting that I did. So there's a personal trigger here too, because I have been screwed way over by people I really cared about and invested a lot into, despite all the signs that this is going to be a problem. I just didn't want to be wrong. So that's my initial assessment of this would be, if you're old enough and mature enough to have a conversation with that person and say, I don't know why I feel this. Do you feel anything in regard to me? Now, if they're a mature person, they're going to say, I appreciate you sharing that with me. Let's try to figure out what that might be. If they're not mature, they're going to get defensive and start saying, well, you do this and you do this and you do that. And that might tell you something about the darkness you're feeling, or it might not. So that's one way to approach. Another mature way to approach it is just to honor what you're feeling and create some distance and see what happens. Sometimes you've just had overexposure with a person and you're getting a little bit too connected to their darker side, which everybody has, or their behaviors that are uncomfortable to you. Anytime you get close with somebody, you're going to get to that place of, look at that bitch over there eating crackers like she owns the place. You're going to reach that point if you let it happen. So it could be overexposure as well. So that's where I'm going. See if there's a conversation to be had. See if there's distance that needs to happen without a conversation, or just put up and shut up and decide you want to hang out with this person and you're going to handle the fact that there's some demon walking around behind them, which is the last possibility. They might have something, a darkness or a negativity or a curse or something attached to them that you're picking up on that has really almost nothing to do with them, except that it's something they picked up out in the wild, or it's been sent to them and it's contaminating their way of engaging the world. And if that's the case, call BR549. I mean, I can help you out. Go to KatrinaRasmussen.com.
Yeah, there's a lot of seemingly immature energy around this piece. And when I say immature, I just mean maybe inexperienced. And so I can definitely side with you here. They definitely sound young. And without that lack of experience, there is the measurement of good and bad does seem really inappropriate. And if this person were sitting in front of me, I would have asked a lot of the same questions. I can recall having a few clients come into my space, and they saw me in the beginning of their awakening process and their spiritual journey, and then through to other parts of it. And one consistent theme I've seen across the board is hitting this line where the friendships start to diverge for one reason or another.
Yes. Yes.
And it feels like this is what's happening here. And you said to channel what the divine wants to tell them. And admittedly, on some psychic level, it feels like the friend is actually the one doing the work and getting into their traumas and like
Ooh, look at you.
actually being willing to face the darkness.
Wow,
And
that's good.
the poster is like, what is that? You know, is that
Yeah.
shadow work? And do you mean shadow is in the devil, or are you, questioning
Wow.
the negative experience, not realizing that it's not all supposed to be fun and light and cheery? And this person seems like they have a real bend towards the positive and the good times. And unfortunately, to me, is a bit of a red flag if you are not willing to acknowledge your humanness or the humanness in others. Not that you should have to deal with it. And I think, just as Audrey said, just as you said, um, you know, question why you're still there.
Mm-hmm.
And question what is bothering you. I mean, it sounds like this person needs to also evaluate what's triggering them instead of just projecting all of that viewership on the other person. I think I made a post about that the other day. And you're like, we should talk about it on the show. So magically, here it is.
Here it is.
Overly focusing on another individual means that you still have work to do. And this feels like an overemphasis. It feels like one of those religious situations where they're like, I have to save my friend. And there is no saving that may need to take place here. The best thing that they could do, if I was giving advice here, would be to decide to leave, decide to back away, or like you were saying, to talk to this person. And in your approach to talking to them, I would not be using words like good or bad. I'd be like, hey, what's going on as a whole? What are you feeling? What are you, without labeling someone else's experiences, because what she may feel is bad may just be grief, like general sadness. It may be a realization. A lot of people that come away from religious practices go through this grieving period where they realize how long they believed something and it turned out not to be true for them, and they feel duped and they feel betrayed, and so they have to go through that process. And I believe if you're not having the conversation about that, it doesn't matter. It may emanate off of you, especially if you're exploring spirituality and being spiritually open. In the very beginning.
Something I'm seeing in the middle here is, but all these years, I felt like this bad energy from them. So I get the feeling this isn't a transient thing where the friend is going through some darkness and has just started emanating this.
Okay.
They say it's been happening all along, that they've always felt this darkness. So the thing is, looking back, now, for one thing, I have to acknowledge that kids today, teenagers today are having, and it's, even though you and I have a huge age gap, it's probably true too with you, that the kids that are teenagers now are having an extremely different experience than we had when we were that age.
Oh yeah. 100%.
Their lives are not anything like ours were in terms of where they are in their maturity process, how they are interacting with each other as friends and as romantic partners, how they're interacting with the adults in their lives. All of this is different now. And so we cannot base it on anything we have experienced. We have to just approach it from the dynamic of healer and client. But that being the case, two things. One is, so this is something that they've felt all along. A lot of times, especially with younger people, they are willing, and you know what? Forget that. It's older people too. They're willing to put up with the negative behaviors of other people that make them cringe in order to get the positive parts of that relationship, that payoff. And so there comes a time where it's almost like the bitch eating crackers, where you get to the place where those negative behaviors make you so uncomfortable that you can't be there. And that's where in the egg we get crossings. A curse is something somebody deliberately sent to you. A crossing is the exposure that you have to somebody else's negative behavior that makes you cringe and makes you uncomfortable, even if it's not directed at you. So it could be that this friend has always been mean to the waiter, or this friend has always been one of the mean girls, or whatever it might be. And the other person was just so excited to have this soul connection with this person that they were willing to overlook those bad behaviors. And now it feels dark, and now it's a problem. So it could be that. What you said about the focus on another person really hit me, because you get these people that when they're struggling or when they're faced with a problem, they'll go to this kind of, for lack of a better term, this custodial kind of obsession where they are just wanting to manage every part of another person's life,
Yeah.
rather than deal with their own. And it often does happen with close friendships and relationships. However, the one thing I will say about this that stands out to me is that little sentence. We are very close. I tell them everything about my life. Maybe this person's gotten real tired of you telling them everything about your life. And so they're having some resistance to, oh Lord, here we go again.
Yeah, I can see that
And
too.
they're not, or they're just smiling and trying to tolerate hearing this. And then Jeremy said, and then we went, and then she said this, and can you believe that this? And you're like, oh God, make it stop. And that could be something perceived as a dark energy or a feeling of intolerance that's uncomfortable. So there's a lot to unpack here. So to answer your questions, does anyone have any idea about why I feel this way? No, not until you're on our couch. They really are not a bad person. Okay, don't know them, can't say. Take your word for it. But there is just something about them. Okay, there's something about everybody. Their aura, maybe. Their soul, probably not. Or what is it, or is it me? Yes. Am I bad? Probably not. Those are my answers.
That was a great line by line. For me, I would say, does anyone have any idea why I feel this way? The place to start is on the inside, not on the outside. So take your focus absolutely off your friend and start asking where these feelings are coming from and what inside of you they're attached to. Is there anybody else in your life making you feel this way, etc.?
Ooh, good one. Good healer question. And what are you doing about that relationship? What were the outcomes you had if you tried to talk to them or you tried to distance from them?
Yeah, is this a repeat circumstance? For sure. They're really not a bad person, but there's just something about them, their aura, their soul. These are not questions for you. They're not questions for you. You would
Not your
take your friend,
business.
take your friend to a healer, a spiritualist, a mentor. But these are not your questions. So you can leave those alone and watch your energy feel lighter as you let go of problems that have nothing to do with you. Was it or is it me? Time will tell. You won't have to answer that question on your own. And am I bad? I think this is a very natural human experience they're going through. And one that no one talks about in the beginning of spirituality, because it's all just like, oh my gosh, we found this thing, and we're happy to be here. And yes, Audrey, it does sound very one-sided. I did have you've reminded me of one thought I had, which is that maybe they're keeping this friend around as some sort of measurement of their own growth.
Oh, of their own goodness.
Yeah. And so they're like, oh, well, there's something wrong with this person, but me, I do blah, blah, blah. I meditate. Because I've seen that play out as well. And I've had people sit in front of me and go, I just don't understand why they don't do these things and why they don't engage the way that I do. And to assume that everybody engages with spirituality the same way is the exact problem that we have in this world today, all over the globe. To assume that there is a right way is the exact problem we have. So that is what I have. Thank you for reading that, Katrina.
All right, it's your turn.
I always feel like when you read them, I get more, like, because I'm more auditory, so I get more than when I read it myself. So thank you for that. Okay, next up, the biggin. Okay, user is Ray's 1998. Ooh, I remember that year.
I'm doing some math. I had a baby in 99, so I know how old he is.
Right. Okay. Does anyone else think law of attraction is a very clear scam? I know why so to start, I know why I got into it. After Jehovah's Witnesses, in parentheses, a cult, that is their words, not mine. I had 2 stints with law of attraction, and I'm surprised by their similarities. Someone mentioned to me today, there's no way to disprove it because if you get bad, it's your fault. If you get good, it's your fault. I found several things about law of attraction. 1, it offers false hope. 2, it made me frustrated with others because how can they not see it's their own fault? They're in a bad situation. They must have attracted it. 3, made me dissatisfied. 4, offers an illusion of control. 5, made me fear episodes of sadness, and when I was sad, made it worse. Those are just a few, and no doubt there will be some negative comments or not, but I'm just surprised. I'm surprised more people do not talk about it. Maybe they fear that if they do, it could lower their vibration. It's funny because I'm one of the happiest people I know. I'm one of the happiest people I know naturally, but on law of attraction, I get miserable despite my efforts. I'm on my way out of it now. Despite hypnosis and the like, I don't believe it anymore. But still, I can imagine living for decades like that. I feel fortunate that I wasn't in for that long haul.
I have so much to say.
They just sound depressed and you're not happy. Okay, so and question for you, since you're participating, Audrey, do you believe in the law of attraction? For me, I'll just say I don't know that I've ever actually engaged with the law of attraction directly. It was never something that I would stand in front of somebody and say, well, this that you're experiencing is the law of attraction. There are some very clear to me circumstances where a person is responsible for what they're going through. And it is my job as the person sitting on the other side of them, who they have an appointment with, to say, hey, let's slow down and consider these things and where your level of control was, where you gave your power away, where you were empowered to do something, and how you can move forward further. But before getting deeper in those weeds, and we have a yup from Audrey. Okay, now we know. So I wanted to get the definition of the law of attraction out here for anybody who doesn't know what it is. The law of attraction can be understood by like attracts like. This is from lawofattraction.com. What this means is that whether we realize it or not, we are responsible for bringing both positive and negative influences into our lives. A key part of the law of attraction is understanding what you focus on manifests, which can have an intense impact on what happens to you. If you spend your days wallowing in regrets about the past or fears of the future, you'll likely see more negativity appearing and limiting beliefs taking over. But if you look for the silver lining in every experience, then you'll soon start to see positivity surrounding you every day. Therefore, the law of attraction encourages you to see that you have the freedom to take control of how your future develops, shaping it in the ways you choose. Um, so I am a firm believer, and I just said it, I don't believe everything works for everybody. I can agree with this statement. I do too feel that we are the creators of our own life. And there is a dynamic energy to that statement. There, in my opinion, there are some people that, like this individual, may be prone to a pessimistic or negative view. Now, as human beings, from a survival standpoint, we tend to cling to the negative things so that we don't have to encounter them again. We're very avoidant creatures. And so I've seen both sides of the spectrum, one where the law of attraction creates additional worry, concern, anxiety, and depression. And for those individuals, it seems to me more important to talk about what they're feeling, why they're feeling it, and how they can change it, as opposed to you created this, because they will eventually get to that point on their own. Versus, like, for me and my experiences, when I look at something as this is a dynamic I've created, I feel more empowered to make a change. But I can only say that as an action oriented person. I don't like staring at problems and watching them fester. I'm happy to feel my feelings for the moment. And then when it comes time to actually, put boots on the ground, do something, I love the opportunity to get creative about how to change it. And so, while I can't say that I specifically believe in the law of attraction as a whole, I do think it has some holes and some pitfalls. And again, there are different kind of humans in the world. And I'm starting to notice that the quality of a person's energy field, the way they metabolize energy, the way they use their words, the way their brain is made up, all of these things play a factor. And while we create our reality, what do you say to a person who is chemically imbalanced and has literally no control over the reality that they're experiencing, because they're just on chemical responses to the world around them? I'm curious on other people's thoughts about that. Does it still feel like they are creating their reality? Because to me, it seems like they're players in the game at that point, and they're susceptible to what others are doing for them in the case of them being maybe incapacitated or not able to take care of themselves at any level. Or, I what do they call them? NPCs. Like, I believe that some people are NPCs, and they're just here to kind of bump into and navigate around. And so the law of attraction has some holes for me. Is it a scam? It is another way of engaging with the world. Some people need religion. Some people need indigenous practices. Some people need the law of attraction. The only thing I don't like about law of attraction is finding people who use it as a gatekeeping mechanism to keep people out of how do I say this? Keep people out of feeling like they've achieved something, or that uh, that they are constantly wrong. Because there are people that capitalize on that. You've created this negative situation. I mean, you see it all over spiritual TikTok. So anyway, those are my initial thoughts.
I wrote down a whole bunch of stuff that I swear to baby Jesus in the manger should be embroidered on pillows. Okay. So
Aw.
I'm going to start out with the idea. I mean, right out the gate, what they're asking, does anyone else think law of attraction is a very clever scam? So I think that they said scam. They should say cult.
Okay.
Because let's face it, I mean, multi-level marketing is a scam.
Fair.
Okay. What you're talking about is cult behavior, where you've got one charismatic leader or multiple charismatic leaders, and there was a singular creator of law of attractions originally, and then Marianne Williamson kind of brought about a resurgence of it later with the book that she wrote on it. So before she ran for president, but so you've got this way of believing that if you believe anything but this, you're just wrong. And that's another form of, and the emotional manipulation of it. Sure, we could put it into this category. And like you mentioned, there are actual people that have really taken advantage of this. And what comes to mind is Keith Raniere from Nexium, who created this
Oh, that's
whole organization that targeted these seriously wealthy, yuppie people with money to
yeah.
take these Scientology stolen classes and even a Scientology stolen program. And as they advance through the hierarchy of it, it becomes more and more a portion of, okay, so you think that I'm this bad person who takes advantage of people when they are. Why would you attract someone like that into your life? We need to look at what it is you're doing
Right.
to
As you're being abused.
right. So you're projecting this on to me. What is it? Is it in you that is the mirroring exercise? What is it in you
Mhm.
that's doing this? Another one that does this is the Twin Flames universe.
Twin flame one. Yep. Twin
What
flame
is
you.
it in you that is causing me to abuse you or causing you to think that I'm abusing you? So it's an amazing deflection. And yes, like Audra said, lots of people are going to commercialize it, take advantage of it. But you mentioned this person mentioned that they were previously a Jehovah's Witness. Like, you got the cult virus, okay? So once you have, and this has been proven, that once you have had the experience of being drawn into a cult-like environment and given the old woo woo woo, during the preaching of it, you are then more susceptible to it in the future. So it's just like when you've had chicken pox, you can then get shingles later.
Right.
So yeah, you're at risk, but you're also at risk for identifying anything that feels a little bit culty as being a scam because you were duped before, or you were taught things that you believed that were later disproven, and that was definitely uncomfortable. And I get that. And yes, I mean, it happens to all of us, but it happened to people in this situation in a really big way. And so you're going to be scanning. But yes, I mean, there are definitely aspects of some ways that LOA is used that are a little bit culty. And we talk on here a whole lot about toxic positivity. And this, when it is abused, is definitely an aspect of toxic positivity as well. Um, there's this huge range, and you mentioned this huge spectrum of law of attraction validity. And you've got the one end, which is everything that happens because you attracted it to you with something inside you, or some pre-life contract, or there's always some reason why all this bullshit is going on with you, and it starts and ends with you. And that is a kind of warped funhouse mirror reflection of that whole idea of, yes, you can only control yourself, and there are empowerments for almost any situation that Dahlia and I can help extricate you from that. But it takes work, and that work has to come from you. You cannot have the expectation that anybody else in your engagement is going to help you do that. We can hope that they will, but we can't expect that they will because we can't control them. Now, that's one end of it. The other end, and that's part of this whole blaming the victim thing. And that comes into heavy play with laws of attraction. And you get into this thing of, well, this child that was abused for the first 16 years of their life must have attracted it in some way. You can't take every situation and make it fit into that little law of attraction bucket, because life is messy and life is nuanced. And I really feel like law of attraction developed because somebody wanted life to be more simple than what it is. And when we talk about this idea of what you focus on is what you bring into manifestation, that's true, as you pointed out very beautifully, to a degree. To a degree, it's true. But if that was 100%, every 12-year-old would have a pony. And I've said that before. Just
Absolutely.
focusing really, really hard on something isn't necessarily what draws something to you. In fact, it can be what repels somebody. And that's why we have these restraining orders that exist. Another thing I would bring up is my shit went out. Hang on. I got to get back here. They said I don't have it up anymore because my iPad closed on me. But they said something about, they go through all these reasons why they're not happy with law of attraction and why it doesn't work for them and how sad they feel when they're on it. And again, and we get this a lot with our Reddit posts. And I understand why it happens, but it's sad that it happens. And that is these people that are mature enough to operate a computer want permission to do what they already know that they should do. And I get that a lot with clients coming in too. Like we talked about when we talk about things like the toxicity of family relationships around holidays. And I get people that just want permission to not go to the dinner. And you're just like, okay, don't go to the dinner. $65, please. You just
right.
You kind of feel like that's what they want. So my answer to this is exactly what Audra's saying, which is if it hurts when you do this and you have a conscious choice, don't do it. But don't get, and I did not see one bit of evidence in this person's post of this, but I know people who do this. Don't get snobby and shitty when it works for somebody else.
Right.
There's a reason we have all these different paths. And there's this wonderful story. I was raised Christian, so I know all the lore. And one of the stories I always found fascinating was the story of the Tower of Babel, where man had the hubris to build a tower all the way to heaven to reach God. And God was having none of that bullshit and just, kind of, was ready to destroy the temple, but the structure, the tower. But what he did instead was make them all speak different languages so they could not communicate. And so they couldn't cooperate, and therefore they couldn't build the tower together. And it just got shit canned, the idea. So what gets me about that is the fact that a lot of people took that very literally, that there was a tower and there were these people and everybody spoke the same language, and very suddenly everybody didn't speak the same language. For one thing, it's a creation story about the different formations of languages around the world and an explanation for that, because we have to have our boxes checked. We've got to have explanations. The other thing I feel like it represents is going back to the original idea of the Tower of Babel, which was to reach God. And I think that it is an allegory for the idea that we all speak a different language with God. And those languages are reflected in the wide variety of spiritual access and spiritual paths that connect us to God. And it's not my job to say, well, the English language is far better than the Japanese language. We don't criticize how other people speak to each other, except for that whole, you're in America in a Walmart, talk English kind of thing. You know, we shouldn't criticize the native language of other people talking to other native people or people who speak that language. And it's the same thing with spirituality. We shouldn't criticize, as it harms none, what brings another person closer to God or to their best selves. And if law of attraction really just hits all the buttons for somebody and causes them to engage the world with their best self and feeling the most empowered, I think that's amazing. And that's what should happen. But if it's causing you to feel like this person who wrote this post, clearly that's not the path for you. You might want to find a different cult to join that isn't quite as oppressive to you or triggering to you. Because you know what? Just because you're triggered by something doesn't mean you have to heal it. Sometimes it means you have to create a life that doesn't engage that trigger. And I think in this case, if it hurts when you raise your arm, don't raise your arm. So one thing you brought up is this idea of being somebody who's reacting to things versus somebody who is an innovator or a doer or creating their own experience. As Audra said, we're the creators of our own life. But are you creating your life or are you reacting to what other people are doing with their lives?
Mm.
Or are you reacting to how other people are influencing your life? If your life is nothing but a series of responses and reactions, that's more of a concern than if you believe law of attraction is a scam. So kind of look at how you're engaging, because we should, I mean, and like you said, there are those non-content players. What's the acronym? NCPs,
Um,
non-character players or something like that.
yeah,
I've
something
heard it.
like
I've heard it, but it's basically you're the bumper in the pinball game.
Right.
And it might be somebody's place to be that at some point in their evolution, but I'm a Virgo. I gotta control some shit. You know, I gotta be the one that makes some boxes shake or make some things happen. And so if you're looking at reactionary versus a doer and an innovator, both are exhausting. So pick the one that is going to, you know, give you the best results. And when we look at law of attractions of what happens to you is something that you attracted to you, maybe, or maybe you just make dumbass choices. And maybe you are suffering the consequences of the dumbass choices you made. And maybe it seemed like a good choice at the time, but once you saw the fallout of it, it got moved over into the dumbass column. So you've got to decide how much of this is your circus. How much of this is you responding to things that happened on the outside? Now, if we go back to that abused child, that's a terrible thing
Right.
that happened. But the outcropping of that experience is going to be about how does that child respond to that horrible upbringing that they had? And you can have two different people going through the same horrible experience for the same length of time who respond to that experience in different ways. And that's kind of going to be all over the board as far as how society views those responses. We talk about this weird thing about like attracts like, and we see that in nature, but we don't see that in nature. So I got 13 turkeys that hang out on my property. Like, they started out as little babies together and they still hang out together, and they're big ass turkeys now. And I don't see them hanging out with peacocks. I don't see them hanging out with crows. I see them hanging out with each other because like attracts like. But tell that to a magnet. When you're using a magnet, you can hardly put the same ends of a magnet together. They require polarity.
Right.
And so, yes and no. Nature's the same way as our view of law of attraction. Sometimes yes, sometimes no. And they say, you know, everything happens for a reason. What I've always told my students is yes, everything happens for a reason, but sometimes those reasons are just not very interesting. So that's my speech.
I detected a little bit of with, and maybe it's because he mentioned the Jehovah's Witness thing, but I want to label it as religious guilt where you have to be good enough or perform at a certain
Yeah.
standard in order to receive the blessings. And, if
Mhm.
that's your belief system, that's fine. But when you combine that sort of programming with the law of attraction, is a recipe for depression.
It
It is a
is.
recipe for, you know, dissatisfaction, because when you aren't pulling in the things that you feel you deserve, you're only pulling in little inklings of here and there, spontaneously positive moments. You'll begin to ask yourself, what's wrong with me and things like
Mhm.
that. So I was detecting a little bit of that as you
Yeah.
were kind of going through each of your things. And what also came to my mind was on the topic of different types of people. Some people need something to tell them how to believe.
Yes.
I
Yes.
I can't recall a time in my life where I have ever been that person.
Mhm. Mhm.
So if you and there's no shame around that. I think that has so many different implications. How many options or choices were you given as a kid versus, being punished for being an individual who stands out? I mean, there's so many different life circumstances that really play out for why you may believe on your own and allow
Mhm.
yourself to allow your belief to be inspired and to grow and to add to it, versus needing structure, needing the bumpers in the bowling alley so you don't knock the ball into the
Yeah.
gutter, like all of that. I believe both sides of the spectrum are valid, and this to
Mhm.
me sounds like a person who is searching from place to place for something to tell them, especially at the end where they're like, oh, I've tried hypnosis. It really, this person really reads like someone who doesn't want the power to decide,
Mhm.
because it might mean that they're wrong,
Well,
and
yeah.
that's a challenge.
Another side of that too that I was picking up on just as you were talking. They talk about mentioned briefly being Jehovah's Witness, and I assume was raised as Jehovah's Witness. That's kind of the implication there. Um, any type of formed religion, and I include paganism or the aspects of paganisms that are the past, like Druidism and Wicca, and not just willy nilly folk magic like I practice, but I mean just the actual spiritual paths. There it's a little bit culty. They any standardized religion is it has that idea of we believe this, and if you don't believe that, you're a little bit wrong, or you're a whole lot wrong. There's this hive mind that happens and has been spoken about by the Jehovah's Witness folks that I've known quite extensively, that the importance of thinking alike and thinking like the people around you. So when I'm reading this as not being that kind of person right now, and what you just said, I'm on my way out of it now, despite hypnosis and the like. I don't believe it anymore. Despite hypnosis, I don't believe it. So did you have hypnosis to try to believe in law of attraction?
It does sound that way. And then it sounds like they're trying to run from a call,
Yeah.
like,
Yes.
hey, I've discovered this. Everybody needs to know this is like a news expose.
Yeah, like I need to
And
escape from law of attraction. And check this out, talk about your hive mind. I can't imagine living for decades like that. So that's presuming everybody has your experience with law of attraction.
right, it's
And I
yeah,
feel fortunate I wasn't in for that long. So law of attraction isn't a thing you're in or you're out of. It's a
right.
philosophy you embrace or you don't. And if it doesn't work for you, it shouldn't need to be a huge hypnotic based process to just fuck it off. I don't understand why there's a big deal for this, except for this seemingly overwhelming need to think like other people and to judge people who are like that for decades.
There's definitely a need for it sounds like this person never got what they needed from law of attraction, and so they were seeking to achieve something by saying this is something you should watch out for. I mean, it really does read that way.
I think they're trying to create another, I don't want to say cult, but they're trying to create another hive mind of
An
survivors.
anti-law
Yes,
of law.
yes, because it sounds like they're not out of that idea of needing that communal mindset to validate what they believe or what they feel. I mean, the average person wouldn't need to go on Reddit and say, I don't understand law of attraction. Why doesn't it work? I'm so sad. I'm just not going to do it, but I'm going to have hypnosis to try to figure this shit out. Just say, okay, well, that's bullshit, and move on. It doesn't have to be a deal.
Right. And yeah, I just there's leaves a lot to be desired. I think that law of attraction is a great segue for people who want to expand what religion looks like for them.
Yes.
At the same time, when you don't leave room to expand beyond the law of attraction and its sort of philosophies and structure, you can get stuck. I do think this person has a right to say law of attraction hurt my feelings.
Yes.
And there may be other people with hurt feelings, and we can talk about our hurt feelings together. But the expose, if you will, sort of fell flat for me.
The expose. I love that. And it's true. Like, I'm going to break off some truth to y'all. Nobody else has ever said this on the internet before.
But what's interesting is there's a, I don't know if she's a tarot card reader or she's a psychic of some kind. And she prides herself on her celebrity status and how she helps people. And that's great. And no shame to her. But I heard her about a day ago talking about how after 2024, the law of attraction will no longer work. And I was like, what? That felt more like an expose to me than what this person is talking about.
And neither will gravity.
and so her explanation was that rather than it being what you think, what you feel, what you visualize coming to you, you will now need to actually have the integrity inside of you. Like, it can't just be your thoughts attracting things. It will actually have to be that your body's in alignment with your energy and your spirit and everything that you do. So like your whole life has to harmonize in order for these things to come to you. I'm intrigued by the idea, admittedly, from a place of what we talked a little bit about earlier, how when you are waking up, coming to realizations of there are things that no longer work for you. And, if I was to apply law of attraction for a microsecond to that situation, there are people that go through a painful process when they're like, man, I used to be able to, I don't know, drink a whole bottle of wine. And now since I've been meditating, it's just not as satisfying. And it's like, why are you grieving that thing that didn't help you? But people do it. And so, you won't be able to attract sort of those mundane, non-awareness moments after a certain point, and you might miss it. And so this is where
that also reminds me of the first post and some of our feelings on that, which is, as you evolve, the vibration that you're working at isn't going to be conducive with some of the relationships that you have.
Right.
So they're going to naturally fall away.
So I'm intrigued by what she said from that standpoint, assuming I interpreted her words correctly. There's an entire possibility that I didn't hear what she was saying because I was like I was caught up by this isn't going to work anymore. Declarative statements like that always cause me to like stop what I'm doing
That's
and
some
listen
rapture
more.
bullshit right there. So when we get to what's magic about 2024? Is it some 8-year bullshit or what?
It's what did she call it? Cycle 9 in Chinese astrology or something like that. And so we're at the end of cycle 9.
Yeah.
And we're going to move into another space. So
Did
I'll
we
send
go
you
into cycle 1 when Law of Attractions was written, or?
I don't know. I'll send you her video.
Please don't. I'll pay you money not to.
So she was actually the inspiration for actually choosing this post because like I said in the introduction,
Yeah.
I'm sort of starting to hear more whispers about this. And she has more than one video on the topic and a whole masterclass. So and people are buying in. And one thing, like I said, declarative statements like that intrigue me and stop me in my tracks. But I also recognize when people begin to flock or cling to something, our ability to actually create that as a reality. So
Mhm.
I'm intrigued to see where it goes. I have no attachment to the law of attraction, to be completely honest. If it disappears, I probably won't notice. If it stays, I probably won't notice.
Declarative statements like that are what get YouTube clicks. So that's good marketing right there, because like you said, it makes you stop.
Yeah, she did
That'll
her
mean
job.
it's true.
She did her job. And depending
Yeah,
on her reach, we'll see what happens. I guess at least in my opinion.
Yeah.
So
hopefully it'll just take a whole bunch of gullible people and make them believe they have to act with integrity. I'm down for that.
Yeah, at the very least.
That's the worst case scenario. I'm good.
All right, y'all. Small side quest, but worth it for the extra 5 minutes. Thank you for being with us. We will see you not next week, but the week after here on Crossroads of Cognizance. Bye, everybody.
Bye.